Welcome to my series, The Probabilistic Model of Providence, PMP for short. So previously on this series, we have discussed the principles of PMP, and we've come up with a list of models that describe or show how providence works in the natural world. Now I'm going to introduce a series of mechanisms by which this happens. And this is going to be another edition in the PMP at the Movies installment to this project. And I'm very excited to do another PMP at the Movies. So today's movie will be the movie Ghost and the Darkness. This is another movie that is really popular in my family, and I think it is one of the greatest stories mankind has ever told. So greatest stories mankind has ever told, just to run through it. The first one, the Gospels, obviously. Then I think it is Star Wars, episodes 1 through 6. And then finally, Ghost and the Darkness. And I'll get into more about that film as we transition to that part of the lecture. Oh, let's get started with these mechanisms. I have acronyms for all of them here. And the first one is going to be the initial probability field. And I think the best way to put this is previously on this channel, we have explored the concept of a Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction. This is a famous chemical reaction where you pour a substance into a beaker, and due to the chemical properties of the substance, it gets spurred into motion. Now, you would expect this substance being spurred into artificial motion to have an inherently chaotic, disordered, or ugly appearing shape to it. But what we find in Belousov-Zhabotinsky that is surprising is that this chaotic system emerges with an incredible amount of order. So it's really pretty if you look it up. There's pockets of color that form, and then these pulsate into other pockets of color, and then you have all these oscillating patterns combining and recombining and going apart. It's a very beautiful thing. But the point about that is that where you'd expect disorder, there is a high amount of order. And I have likened this to the natural world. We explored this in my Belousov-Zhabotinsky reactions in Providence lecture with the story of our hypothetical character, Fred. As Fred goes through life, there's a vast amount of disorder that is potentially available to him. So every choice you make, you can make a million other different choices. And this compounds throughout the course of your life until the fact that you emerge on order trajectory is so statistically unlikely that it shouldn't have happened in the first place. What I realized is that initial probability fields are how this works. Because instead of having a completely, almost functionally infinite amount of potential disorder at your disposal, this probability field sets nodes that confine this disorder into a bounded range. Oh, now we're going to go on to barrier to entry. I think this might be one of the most important ideas in the whole framework, because if you think about it, everything you do has a barrier to entry to it. Your job had to meet a certain barrier to entry. Your partner had to meet a certain barrier to entry. The YouTube video you watch at night before you go to bed has a certain barrier to entry. All across reality, there are an infinite number of barriers to entry that are preset by previous conditions that have to be met or surpassed in order for an agent to go down a course of action. These are replete. The more you look for them, the more you see them. Then we are going to go on to convergence factors. And this is the part of the theory that I haven't entirely ironed out the mechanism behind it. I want to be transparent with you. But these convergent factors, when you take the initial probabilities and they pass barriers to entry, these convergence factors are how how an agent in reality will begin to go down a trajectory. And that trajectory is convergence between them, their environment, their past, present, and future. All of these different factors lead to a convergence that sends an agent on a trajectory, but doesn't make that trajectory absolutely necessary. As we discussed earlier in this series with providential asymptotes, the likelihood always reaches 99, not 1. Then we have your bifurcation point. We went over bifurcation points before. A bifurcation point is traditionally understood as a moment in a condition where a threshold is reached and then this changes state. So we are taking that definition and using it to explain how once a bifurcation point is met, once you have a set point that's a condition, this bounds the future possibilities moving forward from that condition. So because X happened, a whole bunch of stuff is now likely, and the other stuff that's not included is now unlikely. And we trace out that an agent goes through a series of bifurcation points that all constrain the agent's future actions, not deterministically, but probabilistically. Then we have cascades. And this is a model that I didn't include in our previous models video. So I want to draw it for you guys here. So there can be an action that has a certain likelihood. You can put any number you want here, it doesn't matter. But when this action happens, we'll find that it enables a chain reaction of actions that are highly probable. Not certain, not guaranteed, not deterministic, but highly probable. The cascade is the initial action and then everything that follows from it probabilistically. And you will find this in my former work with the discussion of Philip the fish, how a fish simply turning left instead of right starts a nonlinear cascade in which a particular wave crashes on a particular person in a way that seems deterministic, but is all based off of this cascade. And then we go back to ordered timing, which we've discussed before. I'm going to go over this more in detail in future videos on this series. But this is a claim that it is the timing of reality that is ordained, not the specific actions. So evil happens, evil is not ordained, but it happens at a time that is calibrated. And then finally, we're going to add providential ends. This is an easy one. This is the everything happens for a reason. This is where we draw conclusions about the results of the will of God being expressed. And we can all do this in our own lives. Why did certain things happen to me? For me, why did the Lazarus on lithium bipolar happen to me? I can pose that question and I can draw conclusions from it. So those are the mechanisms of PMP. And now I want to situate all of these within a movie. So we're going to take The Ghost and the Darkness. The Ghost and the Darkness is the story of Colonel Patterson. He's this English guy in the age of colonial expansion into Africa. And the English are in a competition with all the other major European powers of the time to conquer the continent effectively. And what's key to conquering this continent will be railroads. So Colonel Patterson has built railroads all over the world. And he is retained by the crown to build a railroad at this river named Savo. And Patterson shows up to build this bridge, and shortly things go downhill. Long story short, a pair of man-eating lions converges on the camp. And the story of the movie is how Patterson responds to this. It is an incredible story, and it is all based on a true story. These two lions, which eventually get killed, are taxidermied on display in a museum, I forget which one, but you can go yourself and see these lions. So now let's run Ghost in the Darkness through the mechanisms. Initial probability field. What constrains Patterson? I think it's good to look at this from a global and a local perspective. But from a global perspective, we have colonialism, we have competition between empires, we have technology risen to the point that we can have a railroad, but not risen to the point where self-defense against these lines might be easier. In Patterson's personal life, we see his wife pregnant. He has to leave her to go on this mission. We see his entire reputation being staked on the success of this project, and we see his boss, an incredibly demanding and mean man, putting all this pressure on Patterson to get this done. And the workers are all rural people, different backgrounds, different religions. They are the manual labor. Patterson is the brains behind the operation. Those are our initial probability factors. So if we think about those as constraints on the potential amount of disorder, the plot of the movie only exists between these constraints. There's only so many ways theoretically it can go given those initial probability factors. Now let's talk about barrier to entry. But when Patterson shows up at the camp, everything's going well, the bridge is being built, and there is a lion attack. One of the workers, this big, strong guy, one of the leaders of the group, gets killed in the night by a lion. So Patterson, drawing on his experience from hunting all over the world and building these bridges, posts up all night in a tree and manages to kill the lion with one shot. So he solves the problem, he's automatically labeled as a hero, and the men who work for him now respect him. That would be the barrier to entry. Because if Patterson hadn't been able to kill this lion, the entire plot wouldn't have worked. The efforts would have fallen apart. The workers would have fled. Patterson would have lost his job. But because he makes the barrier to entry to participate in this environment, he can move forward through the rest of the story, and we can see it unfold. So now let's go to convergent factors. After that first lion is killed, there's a period of peace until these two lions show up, and they just start eating people. They eat a whole lot of people. And the general consensus of the workers is that these lions are the devil incarnate, or they are possessed by the devil. So now Patterson, as the agent in this story, having met the barrier to entry, has to move forward into this situation. So his probabilities are constrained. He's met the barrier to entry, and now all of these factors are closing in on him, determining his pathway through the situation. The boss comes to visit. The lions kill more people. He recruits a world-famous hunter to come help him on the journey. And meanwhile, the pressure is mounting. His wife is reaching her due date, and he's, for the first time in his professional life, failing. Then we move on to bifurcation point. Patterson goes through a succession of bifurcation points throughout this story. When he kills the first lion, that set his trajectory moving forward. But then when these other two lions show up, this sets Patterson himself and the project of making the bridge down a very bad trajectory. It constrains the future actions because the lions show up and start killing people. All of his efforts to beat them have failed. The professional hunter comes in and he can't solve it. And we get constrained and constrained and constrained until, of course, the workers flee and abandon the project. Now, we see those workers fleeing as the end, and then Patterson moving down this path, and each one of those things I've mentioned is further constraining his actions until it is inevitable that the workers leave, though not certain they could stay at the risk of their own lives. Then we talk about the cascade. I think we've done a pretty good job of covering this one so far. The two lions showing up will be what instigates this, and then the plot of the movie moving forward to the climax, we find incredibly likely events coming from this. Now, moving on to ordered timing. Now we're going to step out of the plot and go global for a second. And keep in mind, this isn't like the Clueless video. This is a true story. This is how things actually happened for the most part. So Patterson being called at the perfect time to kill the first lion gains the project the stability it needs so that it doesn't fall apart before the second lions show up. When the second lions show up, bad timing, but the pressure they put on the camp incentivizes hiring the world-class hunter to join the crew. And this world-class hunter is essential as we move forward to the story after the workers leave, to ultimately winning the battle against the two lions by the end of the movie. And global timing perspective here, Patterson is on a strict deadline with building this bridge because, like I said, the English Empire has very high expectations of conquering Africa. The ordered timing of all these events, terrible as they were, chaotic as they were, unplanned as they were, still results in the bridge being built at a time where English colonial expansion can still happen. And lastly, we will close with providential ends. This is the part of the theory where a man is left to his own devices to interpret the meaning behind the events that happen that were out of his control. We are all familiar with going through this mental process, trying to figure out why we're in the situation we were in. And with this movie, it's easy. Why was Patterson called? Why was he called to leave his pregnant wife to go to this foreign country and almost die, leaving his wife a widow, his young child fatherless? Why was he called? He was called because he was the man who could do it. Oh, that is the 7 mechanisms of PMP. Thank you for watching, and God bless.